Hello everybody, how are you doing? Good, I hope. Alright, so I'm doing something a tad bit different today. Since we've got a very busy week ahead of us with the State of Play tomorrow, or at least it's tomorrow for me as of recording this, and then Summer Game Fest this Friday, I don't really have the time to work on a whole video this week, unfortunately. But instead of just letting it be an empty upload week, I wanted to try and get something out, to appease the algorithm gods. So, I came to the conclusion that I'll compile all of my Marvel Rivals wishlist videos into one super mega compilation for your guys' viewing pleasure. I've seen bigger YouTubers like Matt McMuscles, my goat, do this exact thing for his What Happened series. So I figured something like this would be good for like a one-off situation. Now, despite what this video is probably called, knowing me, probably something like the definitive character wishlist or something, I still probably will make more of these later on, so consider this like a compilation of Season 1 more than anything. Now, with that out of the way, it's time to grab a snack or time to get comfy and ready to fall asleep and get eepy, because we'll be going over every single one of my wish lists and character concepts. You ready? Alright, let's get started. Hello everyone, how are you doing? Good, I hope. So, Marvel Rivals was recently announced, and since comic book themed video games are one of my specialties, I wanted to make a video on it. And since I also like fanboying about comic book stuff, I figured a character wishlist would be a fun way to do both at the same time. Before we get started, I just want to say I'll be avoiding more obvious picks like Wolverine, Captain America, and Thor, because let's be real, they're 100% coming to the game at some point. We've already got members of the Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy on the base roster, so any other members from those teams are more of a when they're coming to the game rather than an if, you know? That being said, the X-Men are fair game. I know what I said, I literally just said it. However, I love the X-Men, and even though there are already a few X-Men in the roster, it's my video and I'm gonna take any, and I mean any, chance to talk about the X-Men, okay? I love the X-Men. Anyway, with that out the way, let's get started. To the surprise of no one, Doctor Doom is my first pick. Fun fact, as I was researching for this video, I found out that Doctor Doom was mentioned to be the main villain of the game's story. So while he is less likely to be a playable character now, I already started on this, and truthfully, I'm too much of a Doom fanboy to not talk about him here, so we're gonna go through with it anyway. I can see Doctor Doom being a DPS or support character, kinda like a mixture of what Iron Man and Doctor Strange seem to play like. He could use Magic Blast for his primary weapon attack, and then for his abilities, I could see him summoning Doombots as turrets to place around the map. Maybe they could also patrol around the map on like key points. I don't know, that might be a little too overpowered, but would it suit Doom? Yeah. Alternatively though, this is not in the script, I was just thinking this mechanic might work better for Ultron, but we're going to ignore that for right now. Anyway, Doctor Doom's ultimate attack, I honestly have no idea what it could be, I'm just kind of winging this part. I was originally thinking it could be the ultimate nullifier, but that would suit Reed Richards way more, and if they ever add him to the game, that's what his should be. So, it could just be an EMP that disables abilities. There we go. Side note here, I doubt it would actually happen, but it'd be really funny if he had hidden missiles and his foot dive from Marvel vs. Capcom's abilities. I highly doubt it, but it would be really funny though. If you've been following the channel for a while now, you probably know that Moon Knight is one of my favorite Marvel characters. So, yet again, a bit of a biased pick here, but also probably not a shocking one. He'd obviously be more melee-based than everyone else considering, it's Moon Knight. With maybe his secondary attack being a ranged crescent dart throw. As for his specific abilities, he could have one that lowers all incoming damage by half. I don't know though, that was the only way I could really think to translate his whole tanking punches thing into an actual ability for this game. Anyway though, for his ultimate, it'd be sick if Khonshu showed up and summoned the moon. What would the moon do, you ask? I have no idea. It looks sick though. This video is making me realize I am more of a style over function person. I just think that would look sick, yet I have no idea what it could possibly do. I don't know, poison damage. There we go. Alright, baby, I'm gonna be crystal clear. MODOK is the entire reason I'm making this video. That's right, I saw the trailer and immediately thought, man, they should add MODOK to this, and bam, now we're here. Unironically, MODOK is easily one of my favorite comic book villains of all time. In my eyes, he's just perfect. Like, look at him. He's just perfect. There's like not a single design flaw. He is just beautiful. Anyway, enough of that. He'd probably be a tank or support class, and honestly, the more I think about it, the more I just want MODOK to have his Marvel vs. Capcom 3 moveset translated into a hero shooter gameplay style. So he'd be able to fly, he'd use a psionic blast for his primary attack, missiles for his secondary. You could even have a move where he shoots a teammate and buffs them TF2 medic style. And then his passive could be something akin to seeing enemy ability cooldowns or something, I don't know. Truthfully, I really do not care how he plays, I just want him in. So Marvel, if you're seeing this, give me MODOK, please, I beg of you, give me MODOK! While, don't get me wrong, I do like the Living Laser. I really doubt anyone watching this has heard of him. As far as I know, his last appearance in anything outside of comic books was the Iron Man VR game. Huh. I honestly didn't even know that was a thing. Anyway, I put him on here less because he's someone I'd like in, and more because I had a really sick idea for a gameplay thing for him. So hear me out. His primary attacks would be, you guessed it, lasers. But for one of his abilities, he could turn himself into the laser and guide it. I'm kind of thinking how the Blight from Dead by Daylight plays, with a mixture of the remote control Batarang from the Arkham games. Never thought I'd use those two together as a comparison, but you get the idea. Honestly, I have no idea what the rest of him would play like. I'd imagine probably a support character. But we rarely see any Iron Man villains in anything nowadays, so I kind of felt obligated to put at least one on the list. Okay, technically two if you count MODOK. I've never really talked about it here, but I love the Silver Surfer. And since this list is mostly filled with villains, I need to throw in another hero or two. I could see him being a support class, as him being a healer fits with his character. His primary attack would be firing energy blasts, with his main ability being able to heal teammates. As for his ultimate attack, I don't really have anything like definitive, but I could see him maybe summoning Galactus and Galactus doing something. That or a big power cosmic laser, I don't know. I feel like the Silver Surfer has the best chance out of anyone on the list to be in the game, since Galactus is playing a pivotal role here. But other than that, that's all I really have to say about the Surfer. This one is a bit shorter than all the other ones, but whatever. Anyway, on to the next one. Alright, so I'm kind of lumping these ones together for the sake of time, but I really think a symbiote character is practically a lock. My only question is, which one? Eddie Brock Venom is obviously the most likely pick, because, you know, he's the most popular, with Carnage just slightly behind him. Both of them are fan favorites and probably the two most popular symbiotes. However, I've got a gut feeling, a hunch even, that we're gonna get Agent Venom as the first symbiote. I can't describe why, there's just something about him that screams hero shooter. He'd fit in strangely well. His attacks would probably just be guns. He'd probably do some symbiote things for his abilities, I don't know, maybe a giant tentacle. Just kind of think the abilities from Spider-Man 2, but in like an Apex Legends kind of format. You know what I mean? Personally, I would prefer Carnage or Eddie first. Mainly Carnage, I love that wacky dude. Look at him. He's great. Anyway, but there's just something, right? There's just like a gnawing feeling that it's gonna be Agent Venom. There's something about this game and Agent Venom that just kind of click in my mind, you know? I'm gonna be honest, this one is going to be fairly straightforward. The reason he is in is I just really like Colossus. He's my favorite X-Men member. Anyway, he'd be a tank and another punch-hard character like Hulk. He could have an ability that makes him more durable or something, I don't know. But there is one thing I do know, and it's the main reason he's on here. So, in the trailer, there's these team-up moves, right? Like, Hulk does the thing to Iron Man, he goes pew, and Rocket jumps on Groot. And would you look at that? Colossus happens to be a character that is associated with the best team-up moves of all time. Depending on another character's size, he should 100% have an ability where he does the fastball special and throws them across the stage. It'd be amazing. In fact, pair Colossus with Wolverine when they drop, right? Have them in the same update. Do it, please. Let me throw my friend across the stage. Yeah, we've looped back around to me talking about my favorite Marvel characters. I wasn't lying when I said this video was a poorly disguised excuse for me to fanboy. Anyway, Taskmaster would probably be a DPS character. His primary attack would be his sword, with his secondary either being a cap-style shield throw, or him holding up his shield to block attacks. His abilities would obviously be him copying the other characters, and while I do know that Loki's ult does the exact same thing, Taskmaster's could be a less powerful and more like overall usable version. I'd imagine it'd have a lower cooldown than Loki's ult, but it'd really only let him copy one of the abilities instead of the whole character. Anyway, I'm biased towards Tasky, so he was a lock from the start. I just didn't want to put him with the others. But man, this wishlist is mainly villains, isn't it? Apocalypse is just... He's so cool. If you know him, then you already know why he's on my wishlist. The dude has so many options when it comes to potential abilities. You could do nearly anything for his abilities, and it'd more than likely fit the character. Size manipulation? Yup, he's got that. High-tech stuff? Oh, would you look at that, he's got that too. Telepathy? Man, do I got some news for you. He's got that as well. Point is, they could really get creative with him. Honestly, I really just want him in the spotlight again. He's such a unique villain with such a cool design. I just love him. His main attack would be he can turn his arm into a gun. His main ability could be he shifts his arm into different weapons. And then his ultimate could be size manipulation, where he goes really, really big. And then just becomes kind of like a brute character for a few seconds. Assuming they don't add Ant-Man. I know that's kind of Ant-Man's thing too. But I like Apocalypse more. Anyway, I know Magneto's in the game already, so I don't know if they're going to go with two big X-Men villains. But he'd be a really cool one to have. This is just a small thing I want to tag on to the end of this, but it's the idea of having certain Marvel characters be announcers. Currently, it looks like Galacta is going to be the game's main announcer, but it'd be cool to get some alternate announcers depending on something like maybe an in-game event or an unlockable. Since this game's concept is practically Secret Wars, why not add the Beyonder as an announcer? He'd work perfectly and he could have some fun dialogue. Or the Grandmaster, for the same thing. That being said, those two picks were just afterthoughts I just had. The main reason I want alternate announcers is so we could somehow get Mojo in the game. He is genuinely the only reason I'm bringing this up. I just think Mojo is a fun X-Men villain, and this type of thing is right up his alley. Let me help you see the vision, right? Now imagine if this game somehow lives long enough to get a decent competitive scene, and it gets to a point where there are esports tournaments. Boring, right? But now imagine if they get a voice actor to basically play Mojo and have him host the event like if it was a Mojo World TV show. I normally dislike any non-fighting game esports events, but I would love it. Imagine having a Mojo VTuber as your commentator. Now, would this ever happen? No, there's a 0% chance Marvel executives would let that happen because they hate fun. That being said, Mojo is also a grotesque abomination of a villain, so I don't entirely blame them. But they're cowards, and they hate fun. Anyways, I'm excited to see what Marvel Rivals shapes up to be. Will it be interesting? Will it die after 6 months? Who knows? Anyway, I hope you all enjoy this. I've got a few more videos cooking alongside this one, so expect those in the near future. I'm wanting to try and be more consistent with content from now on, whether it be videos, streams, clips, any of that. Anyway, I hope you all have a good rest of your day, and don't forget, if Marvel HQ wasn't full of cowards, we'd get my boy Glob Herman in this game. Hello everybody, how are you doing? Good, I hope. It's now been a few months since Marvel Rivals was announced. We've had a few character reveals and even a couple betas. I even got into one. And because I got into one, I now feel a crippling addiction to this game manifesting within the very core of my existence. Luckily, we now have a release date, so the wait will be slightly more bearable now. And while we wait for that blessed day to arrive, I decided to have another go at talking potential characters. Now that I've played the game extensively, I now have a better understanding of the game and its mechanics. So this time around, I'll be fitting characters into their specific roles, along with a slightly less rough idea of how they'll play. Last time, I set a few rules for myself, and honestly, I'm tossing those out completely. I'm just gonna talk characters I want and nothing else. Look, if Jeff the Landshark can get in, I feel like a vast majority of Marvel characters are now possible. And besides, now all those obvious picks I talked about are confirmed. Well, except for one. Anyway, let's stop wasting time and get into my second round of characters. Oh, and also, I'll be referring to each role as the kind of common phrasing, because remembering the specific names like Vanguard requires slightly more brain power than I have active right now. So, while last time I said I would avoid the obvious picks, that was before Deadpool and Wolverine came out. And since he is still unannounced to be in the game, I kind of figure he's in this like safe exception gray area. Like, we all know he'll be in eventually, but I also like talking about Wolverine, so we're gonna go with it anyway. As for a possible kit, he'd be a DPS character with little to no projectile-based attacks. Well, except for himself. See, for those who have played the Wolverine Origins game, which I recommend by the way, he has this pounce attack that he can use to close the distance between him and the enemy, and I think that would be so much fun in the game like this. So instead of having a projectile, he is the projectile. Make that his primary movement ability, kind of like Spidey's web swing or Venom's also web swing. Like, imagine this. A little Canadian man launching himself towards you at insane speeds. His other ability could be some form of tracking, like kind of think Bloodhound from Apex Legends, for example. As for his healing factor, I'd imagine just kind of let him heal outside of combat. That'd be good enough, right? Another thing I want to add, in the last video I mentioned that him and Colossus should have the fastball special as their team-up move, and that still applies here, but if Colossus doesn't get in, give it to Hulk. Come on, it'd be cool. My boy, my sweet baby boy Nightcrawler, look at him. You know, I'm really glad that X-Men 97 exists, if not just to solely show off the fact that the X-Men are literally the sickest team in Marvel. Anyway, Nightcrawler. He's not my favorite X-Men, but man is he up there. And since it's a confirmed fact that you can never have too many mutants in a Marvel game, anyone who says otherwise is wrong, factually wrong. I'm telling you, they're wrong. I feel like Nightcrawler would be a really fun choice for this type of game. I didn't really think of anything super in-depth for his moveset, but I was kind of envisioning he could be a support character, with his main gimmick being teleporting around and, you know, being a nuisance to literally everyone else. Like, imagine your teammate is getting ganged up on, right? Bamf in there, grab him, bamf out. Alternatively, bamf your enemies into that one pit on the Asgard control map. To anyone who has played the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and I hope you see my vision for how annoying he could be. Anyway, I really like this idea for him, and it's honestly the entire reason I wanted to talk about him. I do love Nightcrawler, and I just want to see him in more things, man. Yeah, it's kind of obvious, but there's a lot of X-Men characters on this list. And I'll give you a little spoiler alert, there is one more later down in the list, but then we're completely done with X-Men characters, I promise. Anyway, Juggernaut is like perfect for a tank character in this game. I'd even say he should be the de facto tank character if he gets in. The game has destructible environments, he's the Juggernaut, do the math. Anyway, I was envisioning him to be a character that takes full advantage of the destructible side of things. Like, let him pick up pieces of rubble and throw them for an ability. Like, that sort of thing. But anyway, let's get to the main gimmick I want, right? I want his primary ability to be his charge sprint, that the more momentum you get and the more speed you build up, the tankier you become, and you deal more damage, right? Kind of like a mixture of Reinhardt's charge and Wrecking Ball from Overwatch, if that makes sense to anyone who's played that game. Obviously, in theory, that is super OP, so maybe make the charge harder to steer the more momentum you get. Anyway, that pretty much covers my X-Men picks, aside from that one more later down in the list. Alright, I'm gonna be completely honest with you. This one is 100% a sneak pick, and I'm just doing this just to make me happy. You see, when they announced Absolute Doom for Fortnite, Gwenpool was announced as one of the skins that would be in that battle pass, and that reminded me, oh, I need to read her stuff, and thus I did. So as of making this video, I am still currently reading Unbelievable Gwenpool, and she's already skyrocketed to one of my favorite Marvel characters in a long time. As for her moves, I was kind of just envisioning a DPS character. I'm sure someone much more creative than me could think of something really cool to do for a comic knowledge gimmick. but I was kind of thinking maybe let her see the cooldowns of the enemy team for like their different abilities and ultimates and whatnot. Just kind of like to reflect the fact she knows everything about comic books, at least Marvel comic books. I'm sure NetEase could probably cook something way more fitting than me, but yeah. My biggest request though, if she gets in, is to get a cute team up with Jeff. I love that little guy. You know, those two, they're like perfect together. That's their whole thing. Let them have a team up ability, please. Also, just give me more Jeff. Why is Jeff not marketed? I'm just saying, I want a plushie of Jeff, please. Alright, this one's my last X-Men character, I promise. And honestly, this one's less led by a strong idea I had for a gimmick, and more because I really want to see what kind of design NetEase would cook up for Sinister. Like, imagine him in the art style. He'd look insanely cool, right? Anyway, I'm less confident in a moveset for this pick, but I'll try anyway. I was kind of thinking he'd be a support character with the ability to enhance the DNA of his allies while weakening the enemy. Stuff like decreasing cooldowns, increasing health amount on a teammate, poison damage, you know, that kind of thing. Imagine a mix between Moira and Zenyatta from Overwatch. I wanted to include his clones in here somewhere for a gimmick, but the idea I had for him kind of got changed into something for a different character down the line in the list. So if anyone watching this has a cool idea for a Sinister moveset, let me know. I'd love to see what everyone envisions. Alright, this is now the portion of the video where I go completely self-serving with my picks. Because Annihilus is one of my all-timers for favorite Marvel villains, and I really don't think people talk about him enough. He's basically a cosmic bug Skeletor, and I love him. Anyway, he'd be a tank with his gimmick almost being entirely reliant on the cosmic control rod. I'd envision him being able to absorb damage and then reflect it back out with a temporary buff to his stats. Imagine Sigma from Overwatch, but instead of giving him shields, the damage goes into a meter that he can use whenever. Maybe depending on the amount of energy stored up, it'd affect how powerful the buff is. To show that I love him, this is the only character that I thought about an ultimate for. I'd imagine his ultimate would be that he opens a portal to the negative zone on an area, and any enemy stuck inside the area when it's unleashed would receive poison damage and overall become a squishier character. Honestly, I just wanted a paragraph to gush about Annihilus. I love this dude. Let me cook here, but surely more Hulk characters deserve a spot, right? Like, outside of comic books, what representation has Hulk's villains gotten? Abomination is barely in the MCU. It took 16 years to get the leader into a movie. And I don't think I've even seen anything from Zack since Earth's Mightiest Heroes. There's no love for any of these guys. So Rivals feels like a good place to reintroduce some of these characters to a larger audience. Honestly, I don't have a concrete moveset for him, although I do have a few rough ideas. He'd be a DPS, and for his primary attack, it'd be his Wrecking Ball. And it'd work pretty much exactly like Bridget's primary in Overwatch. His main ability, though, is absorbing materials, so obviously let's reflect that. Let's say he can touch the ground and gain a standard defense buff to his health. Kinda boring on its own, right? But you see, this is where I'm cooking. Let's give him a team-up move with the vast majority of heroes on the roster by letting him absorb a material associated with the different heroes to gain different stats. For example, if he touches Thor's hammer, he gains the ability to be conductive to Thor and Storm's lightning. If he touches a piece of Magneto's metal, he can gain an incoming damage decrease, with a portion of the damage he takes converting into the metal Magneto's heavy shot uses. That sort of thing. It could be super OP or underpowered. I don't know, I just think it'd be a neat gimmick. Alright, this one is probably the one people will disagree with, not because of the character himself, but because of what I'm envisioning for him. Before I explain, I want to say this choice is also influenced by Fortnite, mainly because it got me thinking about how much I like Mysterio. And I mean, it really got me thinking. I kind of realized Mysterio actually might be my favorite Spider-Man villain. Like, I really like Green Goblin, but he's kind of a standard pick. Venom's not really a Spider-Man villain anymore, and Carnage leans more into being a Venom villain, which then leaves Mysterio. And then it also hit me how stoked I was that Mysterio was going to be in the Spider-Man 2 game, and then I realized Fishbowl Head might be him. He might be that guy. Anyway, back to the main topic. I'd envision him as a support. Healing wouldn't be his main focus, but for the sake of some realism, let's say that the alt fire of his main attack would be a healing shot. But the main thing he'd do is illusions. And this is where I'm probably going to be hailed as a madman, but I want Mysterio to really screw with the enemy team. Like, imagine if he could disguise himself or teammates as different characters. For example, make your tank teammate look like one of the support characters and watch the chaos ensue. Or something where he could spawn decoys, and if the decoy is destroyed, it would buff nearby allies. That sort of thing. Obviously, there's a lot of problems you need to work out to make this kit actually balanced in-game, but I'm sure NetEase could pull it off. But basically make him a fusion between Spy from Team Fortress 2 and Mirage from Apex Legends. And I know Loki is the trickster character, and while he is so much fun to play, I want to go even deeper into playing mind games with the enemy. And Mysterio's, he's that guy. And I'm super biased, so... Hey, so remember how in the first wishlist video, I joked about how Doom's kit might work better for Ultron? Yeah, well, I was right. Honestly, on the topic of Ultron, he is the de facto Avengers villain in my eyes. My first major exposure to Ultron as a character was in the animated series Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and man, after that, he easily became one of my all-time favorites. He's not quite up there with Doom and Annihilus, but he is definitely close. There's just something so interesting about an AI character that despises humanity, yet fails to acknowledge the fact that he shares those exact same faults with humanity. He's cold and logical, but at his core he is human, and Hank Pym is to thank for that. Originally, this is the part of the script where I had it written down that I think the MCU wasted his potential by killing him off in his first outing, but, that's some really funny timing, eh? I envision him as a DPS character with the ability to summon Ultron drones as turrets. Kind of like what Loki does with his decoys, but instead they're completely automated. Maybe Ultron can also have the ability to change the function of his drones, like have one patrol a specific area to look for enemies while another drone acts as a turret. Basically, I want to play an RTS as Ultron. Like I said, I originally had this idea for Doom in the last video, which now makes that entry kind of null, right? Well... Did I just use the most elaborate method known to man to talk about Dr. Doom again? Yes. Yes, I did. Do not forget, true believers, these videos are a poorly disguised excuse for me to gush about comic characters I love, and man do I love Doom. In fact, since the last video dropped, Doom's kinda re-entered the spotlight. He's currently the main villain of Fortnite. Now he's 100% the main villain of this game. In fact, he's the main villain of this game twice. And man, there's something else that happened with Doom, but I can't seem to remember what it was. Oh well. Anyway, now that we got an official look at Doom, it'd be easier to identify what role he would be in By Galactus he is a big boy. They're both big boys, in fact. So he'd obviously be a tank. Honestly, I just want to take a second to fanboy about this design because it is so cool, man. I love how huge he is. He reminds me of a Space Marine. I love it. Anyway, with the Doombot mechanic now being something I'd give to Ultron, what could we give Doom? He's got an insane amount of things we can pull from. He's got magic, tech, and... Look, I'll just cut to the chase. I now unironically want Foot Dive as an ability. Look, if Fortnite can do it, so can they. Besides, we already have MVC2 Venom as a skin, so it's not a huge stretch to say that it's possible. And we can still give him the Doombot gimmick in a way, too. Make it that when Doom is eliminated, it turned out to be a Doombot, and he has a reduced respawn time or something, I don't know. Anyway, I'm sure you all noticed that this was his majority villains, and that was actually planned, because I'm about to make it even with one quick segment. So by my count, we need about, let's see here, 4 hero characters. I wonder how we can possibly find 4 hero. Okay, this is going to be more of a segment than an actual concept, but I wanted to talk about it anyway. I feel like a lot of people don't really understand the importance of the Fantastic Four in the grand scheme of things when it comes to Doom. Like, they're intertwined. You can't really do Doom justice without the four. Like, look at Hickman's Secret Wars. Sure, it's got a lot of multiverse stuff, but at its core, it's about Dr. Doom and Reed Richards. So it's wild to me that none of the 4 are announced as characters yet. Maybe they're saving all 4 of them for a big announcement, I'm not sure honestly, but out of any characters that need to be in Rivals, it's them. Also, this part I'm ad-libbing, but Marvel also apparently loves killing the Fantastic Four now. Look at Fortnite, for example. and other things, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, we'll speed past this part because they're pretty obvious for roles, but Reed and Johnny would be DPS, Sue fits support, and Ben fits tank. My main point here, though, is it'd be criminal to have a multiverse-based Doom story without at least involving Reed a little bit, even more so with there being two Dooms as the villains. Hello everybody, how are you doing? Good, I hope. So, I'll be up front. I was not initially planning on doing another wishlist video so soon after the last one. I was actually aiming to make it one of my November videos to help fill the gap between whenever the open beta for Marvel Rivals comes out and, Rivals full release. However, the reception on the last video has been insane. Not only did it skyrocket me into YouTube partner status, it is also now my third most watched video. They even beat the first wishlist video by like a lot. In fact, as of writing this video, we are 69 subs away from hitting the 1K goal. And because we're so close, I decided to do a community poll to see what kind of video you'd all like to see from me next. And well, it was another Rivals wishlist. So because we're on the cusp of hitting the goal, and because the last one did so well, I decided why not, we'll do one more. I probably have enough material to do one more wishlist after this or right before the game drops, but other than that, I don't know how many more decent picks I can pull before I get, completely unreasonable with them. Like, get some real obscure characters. Anyway, much like last time, I'll be going over the characters I'd like to see, a rough idea of how they'd play, and what class type I think they'd be. Oh, also, a heads up, the spooky season might have influenced these picks a bit, so, if you notice a lot more villains than heroes again, yeah, that's why. Oh, and there's obviously some mutants, because y'all know already, I love me some mutants. Anyway, let's stop wasting time and get into my third round of characters for Marvel Rivals. Alright, I'll be 100% honest with you guys here. He's on here mainly because I thought it would be funny if he mirrored Wolverine's place on the last wishlist video, and because he makes for a good thumbnail. Jokes aside though, my thoughts on Deadpool are almost perfectly mirror my thoughts with Wolverine, where I'm shocked he hasn't already been announced for Rivals. Like, come on, it's Deadpool. He's one of the most popular Marvel characters of all time. Like, we all know he's getting in at some point. I'm just shocked he wasn't in the first round of reveals. Like, it would have been great cross-promotion for Deadpool and Wolverine, but like I said, he's more than likely getting in eventually, so. Anyway, for a possible kit, I was actually envisioning something different from what I think most people would do for Deadpool. I see a lot of suggestions be that he could kind of be the Rivals version of Genji from Overwatch, but I honestly think he should be the Rivals version of Junkrat. He'd be DPS, and for his main weapon, it could just be his pistols or maybe swords, and you could probably steal Genji's sword dash for a mobility move, but other than that, I'd make his entire kit explosive reliant. Mainly because the idea of Deadpool being the character with the ability to rocket jump is hysterical to me, and I can't move past it. I even have an ultimate idea, and it may or may not just be a ripoff of Junkrat's ultimate from Overwatch, but hear me out. Give him a comedically large bomb that he'd carry around for several seconds, and once detonated, he blows up the enemy team and himself, but only for him to regenerate and get back up a few seconds after. Also, little side note before we move on to the next character. When he eventually gets in, I sincerely hope Nolan North is his voice actor. Like, personally, I like Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool, but when I read comics and Deadpool's there, I usually hear Nolan North's voice in my head. Anyway, on to the next one. Much like Doctor Doom in the last video, this is a pick I've technically already covered in the first list. However, Carnage there was more of a passing mention among other symbiotes than an actual pick, and honestly, I've learned a lot more about Rivals as a game since that first video came out, so I'd say Carnage is a fair pick. Anyways, Carnage would be so much fun in a game like this. There's so many possibilities for a kit, and I could see the art team for Rivals absolutely cooking with him visually. And as far as designs go, personally, I'd love to see him either with the obvious traditional Carnage design, or something like his absolute Carnage design. Like, I absolutely love the exposed spine look for him. It just looks so sick. Anyways, back to the kit. He'd be a DPS character who specializes in, well, causing carnage. His main attack would be a short-range slash with his arm blades, and maybe for his main ability it could be something like a tentacle grapple that he could use to either close distance or pull enemies closer to him. But the idea I had for Carnage isn't an ability, it's a gimmick. You see, I was thinking for a passive ability, he could have a Carnage meter, and the more damage he inflicts over a certain amount of time, the more the meter would go up. If the Carnage meter reached, say, about 25% full, he'd sprout more tentacles from his back, and that would automatically attack nearby enemies. And the higher the Carnage meter got, the more tentacles he'd have. However, if Carnage fails to inflict more damage after, say, 5 to 10 seconds, the meter would reset. See, there's a lot of things you'd have to do to iron out this gimmick to make it actually work in-game, but I figured something like this would be a cool way to reflect his sadistic nature. I also wanted to incorporate a Devil May Cry style meter into one of these concepts, so win-win? Okay, I'm gonna be real with you guys for a second. I'm shocked I didn't think of Omega Red for the other two videos. Like, he would have easily been someone I would have talked about on even the first wishlist. Like, I love this dude. It just, he never came to mind. In fact, it wasn't until this comment made me realize that I haven't talked about him. And like, seriously, I'm a huge X-Men fan. And I'm sure you all realize I'm a huge Marvel vs. Capcom fan. And I associate Omega Red with Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It's wild I haven't talked about him yet, but fortunately, I'm fixing that now. I'd envision him as a tank character with the gimmick of, well, if you know Omega Red, you've probably already guessed it, but it's lifesteal. His main attacks would be strikes from his tentacle arm things, which are pretty self-explanatory considering it's his entire thing. But make it where each successful hit heals Omega slightly. Not a lot, just a little bit. And then his main ability would essentially be a command grab with his tentacles, where he drains the enemy's health until either his own health bar is full again, or until it's interrupted by an enemy saving their teammate. Originally, I had that just as his main kit, but then I had an idea. I was thinking, for a passive, he could have a mechanic similar to Doctor Strange's Dark Magic meter, to represent his death spores from the comics. He would build up death spores over a certain amount of time, and any enemy nearby when he releases them would receive poison damage. However, if Omega doesn't release the spores in time, he'll instead receive that same poison effect. I don't know, maybe it's too similar to Strange's gimmick, but I think it'd fit Omega well. I know, another X-Men character. Who saw that coming? Anyway, a little fun fact about this one. Originally, this spot was given to a Sentinel. In fact, Sentinel even made it into what I considered was the final version of the script. Until I wrote a joke about how they should use Bastion if the Sentinel's size would be an issue. And that got me thinking, and I realized I'd actually prefer Bastion to a straight-up Sentinel. Fortunately, most of the kit I envisioned for the Sentinel also works for Bastion. Although I did end up going through and tweaking a few ideas to make it more fitting for him, but other than that, we're still good. Bastion would be a tank character who specializes in what he does best, hating mutants. His main attacks would probably just be standard Sentinel weaponry, with most of it being centered around using laser beams. You could also throw in what would pretty much be a carbon copy of Sombra's hacks from Overwatch to reflect his technopathy. That being said, much like I did with Omega Red, the main idea I have for him is a passive ability, and this is something that carried over from the Sentinel kit idea I originally had. Make it so that if there's any mutants on the enemy team, he will deal extra damage to those characters specifically. You know, just kind of to reflect the whole Sentinel nature of him. Also, this is another ultimate steal from Overwatch, but make Bastion's ultimate just a complete steal of Ashe's ultimate from Overwatch, and instead of Bob, he summons in a Sentinel. You know, that way I technically get both characters represented. Yay! Oh, would you look at that? How did he get in here? Anyway, if you watch my Marvel vs. Capcom 4 concept video, you know I'm a huge fan of Death's Head. And I'll be real with you, I wanted to put him in this list, you know, since the first one. But I held back for your guys' sake. Like, because even I know I'm delusional when it comes to Death's Head, right? However, since we're now at the third list and I'm running out of obvious characters to talk about, his time has finally come, baby, and so have I! Deathset would be a DPS character through and through. His standard weapon would be the blaster attachment for his arm, but his main ability would be switching out the attachment for different weapons with different effects. Like, maybe one could be the mace or arm attachment he has, which would get rid of all, ranged attack he has, but it would make his melee, hurt more. Or maybe another attachment could be a flamethrower that deals obviously fire damage. It'd be like the pyro from Team Fortress 2. But fun stuff like that. Honestly, I'm just a sucker for Deathset, and I would love him in anything. Like, put him in anything, I will be satisfied. Ooh, I'm about to make a name for myself here. Just for the record, I didn't include him just to do that line. Mostly. Jokes aside though, Gambit is sick. And like Omega Red, I'm kind of surprised I didn't think to do him in one of these before. Like, I saw several comments last list suggesting him, and I personally love Gambit, so better late than never, right? And yes, I know, I'm doing yet another X-Men character. Who saw that coming? But I will assure you, Gambit is the last X-Men character on this list, don't worry. Gambit would be a DPS character. His ranged attack would be his kinetically charged cards. It'd basically be Genji's primary fire. And for his main ability, I was thinking he could supercharge a card to use as a sticky bomb. And he could probably also have a melee ability using his bow staff. Stuff like that. But the main thought I had for Gambit, though, is his team-up abilities. Imagine Gambit supercharging the other characters. It just has so much potential. Like, he could supercharge Wolverine's claws, like in that one scene in, X-Men 97. Or, he could supercharge Black Panther's kit to give his attacks a little bit more explosive damage. And obviously, if Rogue gets in at some point, they would need a team-up ability. That's just law. Yup, we're now officially back into Madman territory. I'm being completely unironic when I say I want Mephisto playable in this game. Is he possibly too powerful to be playable in a game like this? Yeah, definitely. Does it make any sense for Mephisto himself to be on the battlefield? Nope, not at all. However, much like 90% of the last list, this leads back to Fortnite, baby! You see, Mephisto is in Fortnite as an NPC with whom you can make a deal with to get different weapons or, revive your whole team. And I think that's genuinely amazing. Not only that, the visual of Mephisto with a gun is hilarious and has completely inspired me to try and make this work somehow. So, here's my attempt. Mephisto would be a support character, whose entire gimmick is making deals with his team. For his main attack, he could just have like a basic flame blast that would deal damage to the enemy team and probably heal your teammates, kind of like Loki's primary fire. But I want his main gimmick to be buffing himself or his teammates at the cost of something. For example, you can make a deal with a DPS teammate that decreases their max health bar for a damage buff, between either the entire team or just for him and Mephisto. Or maybe you can make a deal with Mephisto that decreases your damage, but also decreases your respawn time, so you can get back in the fight a little bit quicker. Stuff like that. You see, I'm not at all confident in this kit. Like, this sounds pretty dumb, I'm not gonna lie, I'm self-aware. But, I don't know, something like that sounds like it'd be fun to use when playing with friends online. Anyway, the next is a highly requested one, and the last one, so I'll just get right to it. Yeah, Ghost Rider makes sense for rivals. Honestly, this entire list was super eye-opening because, seriously, how did I not put half of these guys in earlier? Well, better late than never. And little side tangent, how has the MCU gone this long without using Ghost Rider? And before someone says that Robbie Reyes was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., yes he was. And he was arguably one of the best parts of that show. But I mean, like, why hasn't he been used in a huge way? But whatever, I'll save this talk for a different video. Back onto the topic of rivals. Before we talk about his kit, I'd like to talk about which Ghost Rider I'd like to see in. Personally, I love pretty much all of them, but it'd be between Johnny or Robbie for me. But if I'm being honest though, you could probably do both, since they're just different enough you can make them each unique. Anyway, with that being said, I'll talk Johnny for today, and if I do another list, I'll talk Robbie in that one. I was thinking Ghost Rider should be a tank character, with his Hellfire Chains being his primary attack. And just like with the Absorbing Man, I'm envisioning it as being like Brigitte's primary attack from Overwatch. His main ability would be his bike. I was thinking it'd obviously be used for mobility, but maybe give it a trail of Hellfire for area denial too. Kinda think like the Tron bikes, you know how they make the wall behind them? Something like that. As for an ultimate, I was thinking the Penance Stare would work best. Maybe make it where any enemy player that Ghost Rider is facing when the ultimate is activated becomes stunned. Honestly though, I'm not super confident on this one, so if anyone has a good idea for how to make the Penance Stare work as an ultimate, be sure to comment and let me know. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. I might have enough ideas for one more character wishlist, but considering how Marvel Rivals releases in less than 3 months, if I do one more, it'll certainly be the last one I do before we move on to different Rivals videos. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, you should subscribe. We are so incredibly close to hitting the 1K goal, and once we do, I'm going to start putting out more videos. I'm aiming to do at least one video a week, along with some streams in between. But yeah, as always, if you're looking to support the channel, you can now become a true supporter thanks to the membership. Members get exclusive content such as loyalty badges, some super cool emotes, early access to new videos, along with a shoutout at the end of every video, and some other cool bonuses. Or if you're in the need of some gaming energy, go pick up some poggers and use code EuroPoggers at checkout, or use the link in the description. Anyway, thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video, and don't forget, if I do one more of these Sauron and Globherman are locks, I am not joking, this is completely unironic. Hello everybody, how are you doing? Good, I hope. So, here we are, the final character wishlist before Marvel Rivals' full release. You know, it's crazy how we're just a few weeks away from the game's full release, isn't it? Like, it feels like it was just yesterday when this game was first announced. What do you mean it's been 7 months? What? That can't be right. Well, folks, remember, time is just a construct of our imaginations and nothing else matters. Existential crisis aside, since this is the last character wishlist I'll be doing before the game's full release, we're gonna do things a bit differently this time. Because instead of just doing characters that I want, we'll also be covering some characters that I've seen requested in the comments sections from the last few wishlists. Along with me recovering a few of the characters from that first wishlist, since we now know a lot more about the game, and I really like fanboying about these two, so I'm gonna do it again. Oh, and before we begin, I just want to say this ahead of time, but make sure you stick around for the last few minutes of this video. I'll be going over how I'll be approaching character wish lists for this game going forward, so if you care about that, make sure to stay tuned. Anyway, let's cut the yapping short and go straight into my last set of characters. In fact, we'll be starting with a character I've waited so long to talk about. Finally, after all this time, after all the end card jokes, I am finally able to talk about my boy Sauron. No, not that one. Jokes aside though, much like characters like Jeff the Shark and Luna Snow, I feel like he's the perfect amount of obscure to add to a game like Marvel Rivals. Like, look at him. Wouldn't you want to play as a funny dinosaur man? And look, even if you guys haven't heard of him, I'm sure you've probably seen this panel before. Which, fun fact, isn't usually his main gimmick, like, at all. That's closer to Stegron's thing, who would also be equally cool in this game, just for the record, but I only want to talk about one Dino Man at a time. I'm thinking Sauron would be a support character, whose main focus is converting damage into heals for his team. Kinda like a mix between Moira and Zenyatta from Overwatch. Fun fact, I was initially going to make Sauron a DPS at first, before I realized that his gimmick would basically be the same thing I gave Omega Red, but with wings instead of tentacles. So I'm taking some creative liberties with his powers to make him into a good support. So, since Sauron is basically an energy vampire, any damage he causes would fill up a meter that could either be used to heal himself or send it to a teammate. And for his regular kit additions, his main attack would be his claws, and he could obviously fly with his wings, and then make his alt fire a fireball, because, that's fun. And because I love Sauron, you guys already know how I treat my favorite characters on here, where I give them an ultimate, woo! Anyway, I came up with an ultimate for him where he would hypnotize any enemy players near him, which would cause their controls to be flipped for like 5 to 10 seconds. Basically, imagine Scarlet Witch's ult, but instead of it being lethal, it's just really annoying. Honestly, out of all my weird, more niche picks for this, I actually feel like Sauron has a legit shot at being added down the line, because he's unique, and look at him, he's a fun character. Oh yeah, he's an X-Men villain, did I mention that? So yeah, my X-Men bias comes out yet again. Anyway, on to the next one. Alright, you guys already know I love MODOK, and like I said in the intro, we'll be going over a couple characters from that first list with the intention of making an actual in-game kit for them. And obviously, MODOK would have been my obvious pick. I love the guy, he's one of my all-time favorite comic book villains. And much like I said in the first wishlist video, MODOK is perfect for this game. He's the right type of comic book weird that would fit naturally into this game's roster. Anyway, let's get into his kit now. MODOK would either be a support or a tank character, with his entire kit kind of being focused on strategy. Basically, I want him to be playing a real-time strategy game, while everyone else is playing a hero shooter. His primary fire would obviously be his Psionic Blast. Imagine exactly like Zarya's primary fire from Overwatch, with his main abilities being entirely strategy-based, and admittedly inspired by Marvel vs. Capcom 3. His first ability would be a shield that works pretty much exactly like Ramatra's from Overwatch, with his secondary ability being a take on the Analysis Cube from Marvel vs. Capcom 3. MODOK would be able to highlight an enemy player, which would not only let your teammates see the player through walls, but it would also amplify any damage the enemy player receives from MODOK's teammates, but not himself. So basically he would highlight an enemy, and he couldn't do much actual damage to him, but anyone else could. Oh, and obviously I love MODOK, so we came up with an ultimate for him. I'm thinking MODOK would fire a missile barrage that would both deal damage to enemy players, but heal any teammates that are caught in the crossfire. Like I said, I adore MODOK, and I wanted to give him the special treatment that I give most of the characters on these newer wish lists. And there is one more character from that first list that I'll go over, but he's closer to the end of the video, so stay tuned. Alright, I briefly mentioned this in the MCU video that I did. Go watch it if you haven't. But I actually loved She-Hulk as a show, for plenty of reasons. Jokes aside though, I do love She-Hulk as a character even far before the show. I think my first introduction to the character was, ironically, Marvel vs. Capcom. And I'm sure anyone with a keen eye and paying attention to half of these lists have noticed that most of my favorite characters were also in Marvel vs. Capcom, so that may or may not be a huge influence on who I like from Marvel. Anyway, back on topic. The main reason I haven't added She-Hulk onto one of these lists before now is I didn't really have a solid idea of how to make her different enough from the other tanks in-game to, justify talking about her here. But since this is the final character wish list I'll be doing for a little bit, I wanted to give it a shot anyway, and I actually think I had a fun idea. She-Hulk would, obviously, be a tank, but unlike her cousin who can transform for his kit, she would just be locked in as She-Hulk from the start. Her main attack would obviously be her fists, with her alt fire being throwing small pieces of rubble. Basically, imagine pocket sand as a shotgun blast. But this, my friends, this is where the fun begins. Her main ability would be a grapple charge. She would move forward, and if she connects with an enemy, she would then immediately throw the enemy forward, and if it hits another player, it would then damage that player as well. Basically, Wesker's kit from Dead by Daylight. But yes, I want She-Hulk to be able to use enemy players as projectiles. Isn't that fun? Isn't that funny? But wait, that's not all. I'd want her secondary ability to be a kick that would send her and an enemy upwards. And then, if she hit the first ability while in midair, instead of a charge, that attack would change into what is essentially a Potemkin Buster. Basically, I want She-Hulk to be a grapple character. Doesn't that sound fun? And not only that, imagine all the fun skins she could have. A Fantastic Four costume, her lawyer clothes, the MCU design, maybe something even based on her first comic cover. Or even a skin inspired by her new Ultimate design. There's so much potential, and trust me, I would destroy my wallet to get some of these skins. Now, onto what is unironically my favorite entry that I've ever done on any of these lists. I'm not joking. See, I was not joking. On one of the end cards, I promised that if I did one more character list, I'd definitely be talking about Glob Herman there. And trust me, I would never, ever miss an opportunity to talk about the GOAT. Unironically, I love Glob. He's like the personified reason as to why I love the X-Men. Like, when it comes to the mutation lottery, you can either get powers that practically turn you into a goddess with the ability to control the weather itself, or you could be Glob, and I love that. It's what makes X-Men characters so much fun and so unironically interesting. Anyway, on to Glob. Glob would be a tank with the gimmick of basically being a mix between Splatoon and Mei from Overwatch. So, Glob's primary fire would be him throwing his globs at enemies. And for the sake of fun, let's say these globs could bounce around if they don't connect with an enemy immediately. Because that sounds fun. His primary ability would be this, where he sprays a stream of his globliness that would essentially paint that area of the map. And any enemy that walks on his stream would then move slower, while Glob and his teammates would move faster on the globbed territory. Does this make any sense? Not really, but I'm taking creative liberties with this because, I don't know, it's a fun idea. Oh, and for the sake of getting some comic accurate passives in here, he'd receive less damage from any explosive or flame-based attacks. Oh, and obviously we're gonna have an ultimate for him. I love Glob Herman, so the favorite bias applies here. What I'm envisioning for a Glob Herman ultimate is Glob would erupt his globs in a radius around him, causing the territory around him to be globbed, which would then apply the slow and speed buffs, like I mentioned earlier, to the entire area. So if he does this on like a capture point, the entire capture point would be globbed. How many times have I said globbed in this entry? Anyway, look, I know there's no chance Glob actually gets in, but let a man dream. This is like my all-time wanted character for this game. I know it doesn't make any sense, but I want Glob Herman in because it is funny, and I would unironically main. Look at that, another X-Men character. Who could have possibly seen that coming? Jokes aside here though, this is the last X-Men character for me to talk about on this list, so I wanted to end it with a big one. And personally, I think Jubilee is the perfect character to talk about here. For a lot of people, myself included, I imagine she's one of the de facto X-Men thanks to X-Men 97. And I'm so glad people are starting to once again see how cool she is. Fun fact, I also was thinking I might talk about Beastier because he's another one of my favorite X-Men, but I felt Jubilee worked better, and I'm personally biased, so. Jubilee would be a DPS character who specializes in explosive damage. I mean, that's obvious, right? Her primary fire would basically be a shotgun blast, but with fireworks, with her secondary fire being a grenade launcher style firework blast. Now, for a primary ability, I was thinking it'd be fun if we took inspiration from a certain David Bowie styled character. That's right, baby, I want to make Jubilee work exactly like Killer Queen from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Her primary ability would literally just be, she touches a location or character on the map and turns it into a firework bomb. Your teammates? A bomb. The enemy? A bomb. Spider Zero? Guess what, she's actually not a bomb because making a payload explosive might be a tad bit too much. Jokes aside though, I'm not thinking like an insta-kill or anything, I just think this sort of thing would actually be really funny and a lot of fun, and it fits Jubilee as a character fairly well. But if you guys think it's a bit too much, I don't know, make her a vampire again, I guess. You know, actually now that I said that out loud, Vampire Jubilee would actually be kind of sick for rivals, I'm not gonna lie. Anyway, on to the next one. Oh, and speaking of vampires, Blade is possibly one of the coolest characters to ever exist, and I will forever stand on that. I will be a Blade defender until the day I die. Fun fact, actually, Blade and the next character on this list were originally part of the third wishlist video, but I ended up cutting them for 2 reasons. One, me fanboying about both of these characters took up like 10 extra minutes, and I like to keep these videos relatively manageable. And 2, I could then use them on this wishlist video instead. Anyway, back to Blade. Before we get on to the main topic, I also want to say, how is the Blade movie taking this long? I mentioned this in my MCU video too, but like, Blade on paper should be one of the easier characters to make a movie adaptation about, right? Like, Blade doesn't need a huge MCU event for a movie. Just have Blade hunting some vampires, maybe even Dracula himself. Like, that's pretty much all I'd need personally out of a Blade movie in the MCU. Anyway, let's get back on topic. Onto his kit. Now, I couldn't decide whether I liked Blade as a DPS or a tank character more, so I'll kind of let you guys decide that internally. Now, his kit was actually kind of hard for me to conceptualize, because all my good ideas for him are abilities I've already used on the other characters. But I'm going forward with my ideas anyway, so if you see similarities to other entries from past lists, then that's why. But I was thinking his main weapons, keyword there, would be his shotgun and Daywalker blade, with you being able to switch between both of them pretty much exactly like the Punisher. But with the difference being, depending on which weapon you have equipped, his abilities would then change to kind of mirror the weapon he's holding. For example, if he's holding the shotgun, his main abilities would be something more like throwing stakes, in a way that's kind of like a throwing knife, or something like a grenade. But when he's holding the sword, he would get more vampire-themed abilities, like the abilities to bite someone and siphon off some health, or a sword dash, pretty much like Genji's. But honestly, after writing this out, I'm actually realizing this is fairly unique compared to the other ones I've done, so cool, nice job me. Anyway, onto the other scrapped character. The man without fear himself. I'm not gonna lie, I see Matt requested a lot in the comments, and just so we're clear, I agree completely. Like, come on, it's Daredevil. Who doesn't like Daredevil? Okay, I stand corrected. Jokes aside though, other than the fact he was scrapped in the last video, the big reason I haven't talked about him yet is, well, he's a no-brainer character. Like, honestly, I feel like he's even more obvious than Wolverine was. Like, if they don't add Daredevil, something is really wrong. He's the perfect character to reflect the street-level heroes, and, like I said, it's Daredevil. There's a very, very good reason as to why everyone fought so hard for the show to get picked back up. By the way, I am stoked for Born Again. I cannot wait till that comes out. Now, this is where things are going to get interesting, and I say that because I've seen so many good ideas for a Daredevil kit in the comments, and I feel like there's no way I can make a better idea for him than what some of you guys have come up with, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. I feel like the best way to go about a playable Daredevil in Marvel Rivals is to really make you feel like you're playing as Daredevil. Yes, and I mean it like that. First of all though, he'd be a DPS character through and through. His primary fire would be close-range melee attacks with his billy clubs, and for his secondary fire, he'd throw the billy club and have it ricochet between enemies or between walls. Think of kinda like what Captain America's shield is, but like, more stick-like. But Daredevil's real gimmick would be his passive ability. Just make him blind. Just kidding. Mostly. Instead of being directly blind, give him a detective vision style thing, where he can see enemy movement through walls. Like, I wasn't joking, I really want to feel like Daredevil here. Like, I want to see the world through his eyes. Kind of like something like this. Just toned down so you could still see important details about the map and characters. Maybe make the vision a toggle too. Oh, and for a movement ability, give him a Pathfinder-style grapple to swing around like. Less like Spider-Man and more Batman, if that makes sense. Yeah, I lied about Jubilee being the last X-Men character on here. Come on, it's me. And what? Did you really think I'd go on and on about being an X-Men fan and not talk about Scott in one of these lists? Like, come on. I know people think Wolverine is the definitive X-Man, and I understand why, but to me, Cyclops will always be the X-Man. And much like I said with Jubilee, I'm so happy that people are realizing just how cool Scott can be these days. Like, sure, he's a Boy Scout through and through, but that's part of his charm. He's the leader of the X-Men, and that is usually for a very valid reason. Besides, he's a great character for when the standard X-Men drama rolls around. Now, before I talk about his kit, I want to give credit where credit is due, because this comment here came up with the perfect Cyclops kit. Like, I genuinely could not think of anything more fitting for Cyclops. I'm still going to try my own attempt at it, but just so we're clear, I think this is the better way of incorporating Cyclops into Rivals. So, for my idea, Cyclops would be a DPS character with a primary fire similar to Zarya from Overwatch. And for his abilities, his main ability would be a larger optic blast, but since his beams are actually kinetic energy and not like lasers, I was thinking it would be a multi-use ability, like for either pushing an enemy further back or using it to move Cyclops mid-jump. Kinda like that one scene from X-Men 97, where he uses his optic blast to move himself around the area. You know, something like that. His secondary ability would be, much like the earlier comment suggested, a buff to his teammates, where the more teammates that you have near you, the stronger both you and their damage will be. Personally, that's all I've got for Scott. Like I said, I think the other concept is perfect, so it was actually kind of hard making something else for him. But anyway, on to the next character, and he's another highly requested one, so... Godspeed, Spider-Man. Now, I'm gonna be real with all of you here. I'm so glad Norman is highly requested, because this is exactly the justification I need to talk about Green Goblin. Like I mentioned back when I talked about Mysterio, I love Green Goblin, even if I do feel he's a bit... well, you know, everyone likes Green Goblin. Like, aside from Venom, he's the de facto Spider-Man villain most people think of. He's a really fun character, and while I usually prefer comics to movie adaptations, let's be real here, Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin is just phenomenal. There's a reason he's so quotable. Side note here, but fun fact, one of my first videos to actually gain traction was a Green Goblin Fortnite video back in 2022. Crazy how time flies, right? Anyway, Goblin would be a DPS character, with his primary fire being pumpkin bombs, kinda like Junkrat's primary fire. But, for one of his abilities, you could change the property of the pumpkin bombs. Like, for example, you could switch it from explosive to be poison damage, deal fire damage, or, you know, freeze people. That sort of thing. And now, while I do feel like I've cooked with this idea, I have a cooler one. Instead of his glider being on by default, I want to make the rest of his abilities revolve around the glider. So, what I'm thinking is, make it so it has different active states. With one being the fly state, where you know, obviously fly on it. With another state being the turret state, which would follow you and deal some extra damage to whoever you're shooting at. Or, for a third state, have it be an attack that charges straight forward and stabs anyone in front with those, you know, blades in the front of the glider. Oh, and make it so this can damage Goblin too for, you know, obvious reasons. And finally, we're on to that other character from the first list that I'm going to take another look at, Taskmaster. Back during the first list, I had a rough idea of how he'd play, but because I didn't have any hands-on experience with Rivals yet, it was all guesses on what his abilities could be. But now that I have an actual understanding of the game and how it works, we're going to go back to the drawing board and make Taskmaster an actual kit. Taskmaster would be a DPS, with his primary fire being melee strikes with a sword, and his secondary fire being a shield throw, exactly like Captain America's ability. Now, his primary ability would be the thing his entire kit revolves around, and that is copying moves from every other character in the game. For example, if you copied Spider-Man, you'd get his web strike move, or if you copied Black Panther, you'd get his spinning kick. Now, this is a lot harder to actually pull off in-game, considering it'd kinda be hard for him to copy something like, let's say, Loki or Jeff. But fortunately, I'm just a nerd on the internet. I don't have to deal with that. And if he ever does get added, That's NetEase's problem to figure out, not mine. Jokes aside though, I think most of those like weirder abilities could be pulled off by saying, oh look at that, it's some tech he stole that helps him mimic powers. But yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking for Taskmaster. Now, we're on to the last one, and if I'm being honest, I'm surprised he's as highly requested as he is. Like, if I'm being honest, I think I've seen him mentioned on pretty much every other wishlist video I've done so far. So, why not? I'll cover him here quick. Alright, I'll be upfront, and I won't lie to you, I was super surprised to see this guy mentioned as much as I did. In fact, I actually had the read up on the character because I kind of forgot who he was. Like, I kept seeing people mention Reptile in the comments, and I had to, like, actually go on a whole Wikipedia binge until I realized, oh, it's that guy. Right, I know him from the One Thing. But yeah, personally, when it comes to dino-themed characters, my expertise is Sauron, but honestly, the more I read up on Reptile, the more I think he'd actually fit in. But I will admit, the concept I have for him is a lot more rough than everyone else, but we'll get into that in a minute. Let's go over what I do have. Reptile would be a DPS character who specializes in shapeshifting. His primary fire would be melee strikes with his claws, and for his primary ability, I was thinking he could grow a tail and spin around, basically turning himself into a dinosaur Beyblade for a few moments. But honestly, nailing abilities for him is harder than I thought it would be, because anything I thought of is already something I gave to someone else, like Wolverine or Sauron, or even Carnage. So, this is where I'll turn it to you guys. So, if you have any ideas for a Reptile kit, let me know. And I know you guys could absolutely cook for him. You guys have been, like, non-stop great at coming up with ideas, so I want to see what you guys could do. Hello everyone, how are you doing? Good, I hope. So, it's been nearly 2 months now since Marvel Rivals dropped, and I'm still very obviously obsessed. And if you're familiar with how we do things here on the channel, you can probably put 2 and 2 together as to what we're doing today. Or, I guess you could just read the title there, but you probably already have done if you clicked on the video, but you know what, that's besides the point. Anyway, not only has it been 2 months since Marvel Rivals dropped, it's also been roughly 2 months since the last character wishlist I've done. And lately, I've been feeling that itch to fanboy, so with that being said, let's bring the Marvel Rivals wishlist back. Although at this point, they're more concept videos than actual wishlists, but that's besides the point. Anyway, from here on out, we'll also be changing how we do things for these lists. Let me explain. While the first 4 lists were mostly focused on characters that I am incredibly biased towards, from this point forward, I'll be broadening my horizons, per se. Instead of just talking about characters I'm biased towards, we'll be talking about characters who fit into a specific theme or a specific team. This way, not only do I have a lot more characters to work with, and more potential for future lists, I also get the added benefit of having to do more research on characters I'm not super familiar with. To some people, this would be a downside, but as I'm sure you all know by now, I love comics, and having an excuse to branch out and learn more about different characters is probably the furthest thing from a downside for me. That being said, today's theme is a bit more of an easier one for me to work with, as I'm sure you could tell by the title, because we'll be talking about mutants and more X-Men. Those who have watched the previous wishlists already know, I am a huge, and I mean huge fan of the X-Men. Every list since the beginning has had at least 1 mutant in it, and I think most of them actually have 2, but that's besides the point. Like, we've already talked about Omega Red, Nightcrawler, Jubilee, Cyclops, and many, many others. Honestly, I was kinda worried you guys were getting sick of me talking about X-Men, but according to this poll here, it was quite the opposite. So remember, you guys did this to yourselves. So, with that being said, let me get started with the first of my revamped wishlist videos, starting with mutants. You know, I thought it'd be pretty poetic if we started a mutant-themed wishlist with Professor X himself. You know, for very obvious reasons. And this one's probably the most detailed pick on today's list, so buckle up, we'll be here for a few minutes. And I'm also sure a good chunk of you are probably wondering, how would they put in Xavier, considering the whole, you know, wheelchair thing? And to that I say, he's been walking in the comics for like a good long while now, so it's more than possible. That being said, though, it is an interesting discussion to have, because which design would they go for? Would they take after his more modern Krakoa era design, or would they lean more into the traditional hover chair one? For the purposes of this concept, though, we'll be going with the hover chair. While I love pretty much everything tied to the Krakoa era of X-Men, I had a actually pretty cool idea as to why we'd go with hover chair Xavier, and it's because of one person, Magneto. You see, the Magneto we have in-game is from the Krakoa era, but with all the funky timeline stuff happening in the story, not every X-Men in-game is from the same timeline or universe. So, I think it'd be really cool if we took advantage of that and put a younger Xavier in. We could maybe pull him from right as giant-sized X-Men starts, or maybe we could even go further down the timeline and pull Xavier from right when the first X-Men team was established. I basically want to see these two very different eras of X-Men comics directly interact with each other, with Magneto representing Krakoa and Xavier representing the more classic era of X-Men. Like, the dialogue between these two would be really cool to see. Now, enough story stuff. Let's talk gameplay. Professor X would be a strategist character who focuses on buffing his teammates and just being a nuisance to the enemy. His main attack would be your standard projectile-based one, similar to what Invisible Woman or Mantis has, where it either deals damage to the enemy or heals allies. Ideally, it would be flavored as psychic damage by having it look like the telepathy waves he has in 97. Now, his main two abilities would basically be the same thing, but with different effects. One is for buffing allies, and the other is for hindering enemies. And for the sake of balance, let's say he can only select one ally at a time for a buff, and one enemy at a time for a debuff. Now, I'm sure you're asking, what exactly would he be buffing and then nerfing? And to that, my friend, I say, cooldowns. That's right, I want Xavier to screw with ability cooldowns. I just think that would be really fun. And for example, his ally buff ability would decrease all the ability cooldown times by like, let's say 25 to 50%. And then for the enemy debuff ability, he would increase cooldown times by the same percentage. Both of these effects would only end on two conditions. 1, Xavier is eliminated. 2, you leave the range of the ability, which would be like, let's say, 3 payloads worth of distance, I don't know. Now, before we move on to the next entry, let's talk about a quick ultimate idea I had for Xavier. For his ultimate, he'd be able to take control of one of the enemy players. So, imagine this. You're an Iron Man, ready to use your pulse cannon on the enemy team. But then suddenly, Xavier takes control of your mind, and uses that ult that you saved up for this crucial moment against your own teammates. That sounds annoying, right? Good! Because that's exactly the energy I want Xavier to have in the game. I want players to see an enemy Xavier and just be engulfed in an unreasonable rage and desire to solo ult him. Because, like, that's how we all feel about Xavier, pretty much, right? Right? I'm not gonna lie, fitting Mystique into a hero shooter was shockingly hard, at least for me. Personality-wise, she's perfect, and I mean perfect for this game. That was far from the problem. The problem is that any idea I had come up with was something that I already did for Taskmaster or Mysterio on previous concepts. Or it was also something Loki could already do. But that's what I thought at first. Then I had a realization. You see, I tried to come up with something on my own at first, and then failed. Then I looked to Overwatch to see if there's anything that could be used as a basis or inspiration, but nope. I was looking in the wrong place, because the perfect kid for Mystique already exists. Now, I'm sure anyone with a general idea as to who Mystique is and some basic knowledge in popular hero shooters likely kind of already knows where I'm going with this, but make her play pretty much exactly like Spy from Team Fortress 2. Give her the whole shape-shifting gimmick, crits on backstabs, all of it. And yes, I know Loki has that exact thing already, but come on, it's perfect. And then for an ultimate, maybe just make it Deadeye from Overwatch, but does more damage if, you know, the enemy is facing away from you. That sort of thing. Much like Mystique, Beast was also shockingly hard to come up with something for. But unlike Mystique, where I kept thinking of abilities that were already used, for Beast, I kept coming up with kits just fine. It's just I couldn't lock in whether Vanguard or Strategist would work better for him. I ended up leaning towards Vanguard, But if you have an idea for a strategist-themed Beast kit, let me know. Like I just said, Beast would be a vanguard. His primary weapon would be a repurposed sentinel arm that functions kinda like the Spartan laser from Halo, where it does devastating damage, but it takes a few seconds to charge and fire. To balance this out though, Beast's melee attack would hit quicker and deal more damage than the average hero. His main ability would be a shield generator, where any teammate in range of Beast when activated would receive a max of 25% armor to their health. Kinda imagine what Reed does with his grab, but instead of its shield fading after a few seconds, it'd remain until it's depleted. I'm gonna be honest, Kitty's kit is probably the one I had the most fun coming up with for the list. Because while Kitty would be the playable character, there is no universe where I wouldn't include Lockheed as a part of her kit. So it's technically a 50-50 character, kind of like Cloak and Dagger, but also not, you'll see what I mean. Kitty would be a strategist character. Her primary fire would be Lockheed's Fire Blast, which works exactly as I'm sure you're probably imagining it would. But it would also heal allies for the sake of, being a strategist. Her passive is also quite obvious. Kitty would be able to phase through walls automatically by approaching them and just walking through. There is some logistic issues they'd need to sort out for it to work, but the way I picture it is, if there isn't an interior for the wall that she's trying to phase into, she'd instead just kind of come out of the other side of the wall, like whatever the nearest available wall is. Something like this. I probably drew this in MS Paint in like 5 seconds, but you get the idea, hopefully. Her main ability is also pretty straightforward. Activating the ability puts Kitty into an intangibility state for like 5 to 10 seconds. She can't be damaged, but can't damage either. If she phases through a wall in this state, nearby enemies would be able to follow her through the wall for as long as the state is active. Her secondary ability would be Lockheed. The ability would allow you to take control of Lockheed, basically turning him into a drone, so you could fly above the enemies and shoot fire from a remote position. For those who have played Apex Legends, imagine Crypto, but if the drone had a flamethrower. Control of Lockheed would end after either A, Lockheed takes enough damage which would then reset him to Kitty, B, Kitty just relinquishes control, or C, if Kitty herself is eliminated while controlling Lockheed. I honestly couldn't think of anything really good for an ultimate for her, so let's just give Lockheed a gun. Whole team will be down in like 10 seconds tops. So, fun fact about Sabretooth. I've been wanting to do a kit for him since like, maybe the second wishlist, but every time I go to make the roster, I end up thinking, I'll do him next time, and that just kept happening over and over. Well, today, finally I'm adding him to a list. Sabretooth is an interesting character to work with as well, because ultimately, him and Wolverine are going to share a lot of the same characteristics, and that's more than okay, especially for the kit. I want Sabretooth to be to Wolverine what Venom is to Spider-Man, where the mechanics kind of share some middle ground to some extent. Obviously, not completely, but you kind of get the idea. So, let's work with that in mind. Sabretooth would be a vanguard, with the focus on being a genuine threat to the entire team if he's left unchecked for too long. You see, for Sabretooth, I want him to have a passive that allows all of his attacks to build up a Savage meter, kinda like Wolverine's Rage meter. Once the meter is full, his next attack or ability will do 2 to 3 times the amount of damage or healing, more on that in a second, that it normally would do. For his main ability, I was thinking something like kinda like the Pounce Wolverine has, but instead of shooting upward, this Pounce would move straight forward, and if it connects with an enemy, he would pin them down, slice at him with his claws a couple times, and then throw him forwards. This ability would also heal back like 10% of health. But, if the Savage meter is full when this ability is used, not only would it deal more damage, but the healing received from the ability would be bumped up to 25%. His second ability could be something just like him getting on all fours and moving faster for like 10 seconds. But basically, I want Sabretooth to be a tankier, dark reflection as to how Wolverine plays in-game. It's a shame there's no rival mechanic in the game. Like team-ups, but if the character's rival is on the other team instead of someone on the same team. Like, Sabretooth and Wolverine would be perfect for this sort of thing. I'm gonna be honest, armor is entirely a sneak peek here, because while the 616 armor would be cool, I think it'd be sick if they took from the Ultimate Universe version of her. I don't know if I've ever said this on a video yet, so I'll say it now, but I adore the new Ultimate Universe. Like, this is one of those cases where it feels like Marvel listened in on my very thoughts and designed everything about this universe to appeal to me and me alone. Like, Ultimate Spider-Man, it's just perfect. It's everything I've wanted out of a Spider-Man comic in years. The Ultimates is probably my favorite Avengers adjacent story, so far anyway. The Maker is one of my all-time favorite villains, and the Ultimate X-Men, it's one of those things that, it just scratches an itch in my psyche, you know? Like, I look at this and I think, hell yeah. Don't get me wrong, it's a departure from the normal X-Men flavor, but I'm more than fine with that. Anyway, back to armor, I'm getting off topic. The ironic thing about this pick, though, is, despite my fanboying here, I actually don't have a good idea for her kit. Like, obviously she'd be a Vanguard, and I could maybe see her summoning her armor in a way kind of similar to how Ash summons Bob in Overwatch. But other than that, I couldn't narrow down anything that would make her unique. Especially since I already gave Beast that armor mechanic, and I didn't think about that while I was making the concept, and I don't want to go back and redo Beast, so, we're gonna do this. I'm gonna do my normal comment bait thing here and ask if any fellow Ultimate X-Men fans have an idea for armor, please let me know below, and I'll pin the one I like the best. Oh, and go read Ultimate X-Men if you haven't already. Actually, just go read anything from the Ultimate verse. I love it. Now, you're probably thinking, didn't you already cover Apocalypse Zero? Why yes. Yes I did. In the first wishlist video, and like the reasoning I have given for all the other characters I've already covered, I made that first list back when I didn't know a ton about the game. So, we'll give them a proper kit here. And besides, there's like, what, 2 characters left from that initial list that I haven't talked about again? And spoiler alert, I don't really feel like giving Living Laser another shot. So, we'll cover Silver Surfer someday, but anyway, on to Apocalypse. He would be a Vanguard character. Kind of. I'll explain that in a moment. His primary attack would be his arm cannon, which would function pretty much the exact same way Iron Man's primary does. And his primary ability would be deploying a shield that functions pretty much like Ramatro's from Overwatch 2. And for his second ability, it would be called Reconfigure. Now, what does that even mean? Well, I was thinking for his gimmick, for all intents and purposes, he should be able to switch classes on the fly, becoming a jack of all trades but master of none type character. His default configuration would be Vanguard, and I already went over the ability for that. His second configuration would be Support, which would switch the shield out for a healing beam. And for his final configuration, it would be the Duelist mode, which would disable the primary ability, but buff his standard attack. And then for his ultimate, we'll be keeping the one from my original list, where he grows like 3 times bigger and becomes an unstoppable titan for like 15 seconds. Anyway, on to the final entry for this list. There was no way I was going to do another one of these lists, especially one talking about mutants, without talking about Rogue. Like, I mean, I already did Gambit, what, 2 lists ago? And even then I mentioned if they add Gambit, Rogue is a must, and vice versa. Like, even Fortnite knew that was a heavy requirement for these characters. Rogue would be a Vanguard, with her primary attack being short-range punches that deal heavy damage. And her primary ability is also pretty obvious, and I fully admit here, this is the first time 2 of my concepts are going to completely overlap. Because her primary ability would be a command grab, that if it connects with an enemy, will switch her primary ability to an ability from the enemy. Which is practically the exact same thing I did for Taskmaster, but like, come on, it's Rogue. It'd be a crime if she didn't have the ability, that's like her whole thing. And I guess you could flavor it by having the grab drain health too to help differentiate from Taskmaster's idea, but that's besides the point for now. Her secondary ability would let her switch between flying like Iron Man, or just walking like pretty much everyone else. I know, very creative. And then for an ultimate, she'd basically have a limited version of Loki's, where she'd grab an enemy and steal their ultimate. Now, this one would be difficult to actually balance for characters like Hulk or the Punisher, because one, I don't think Rogue can grow like 15 times her size and doesn't have a bazillion guns. But, you know, it's well known at this point when it comes to these concepts. That's on NetEase to figure out if they ever implement something like this. Not me. I'm just here to talk about rough ideas and fanboy about characters. But yeah, those are some of my ideas on how to implement these characters into Rivals. Now, I also want to take a few minutes to give some honorable mentions, because this list was originally very much bigger, but if I wanted to get this video out on time, I had to cut a few of the characters in this list, and this was already taking longer than normal, so it was kind of a necessity. Those characters were Emma Frost, Sebastian Shaw, and Jean Grey. I'll probably cover them in the future if I ever do another mutant-themed list, but if you all want to have a go at making concepts for them in the comments below, go ahead. And as always, if you're looking to support the channel, you can now become a true supporter through the membership. Members get exclusive content such as loyalty badges, super cool emotes, early access to new videos, along with the shout out at the end of every video, and other various perks. And if you play Fortnite and like to support me through that, make sure to use code Yerocmai in the item shop. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, if we can get the Maker as a skin, please give us Winter Soldier Wolverine, please, I beg of you.